Hello, everyone. My name's Julie Clague, and I'll be chairing the event tonight. Just before we start formally, I'd like to hand over to Emily James, who is our technical guru, and she's going to say a few words before we commence. Emily, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Me again. Just here to do a bit of housekeeping, but my name is Emily James. I am here to be your tech guru, as Julie says. So for those of you who have not been using Zoom during the pandemic, like we have at university, just usual things, please keep yourself on mute. This just reduces the background noise and helps everyone hear the person that is speaking and keeps the audio nice and clear for afterwards when we will put the videos on YouTube. If you don't want to end up in the recording, then please just keep your video feed off. We will be using the speaker format, but this just means that your picture won't end up in any version of the recording. And as per usual with this, if you just have any questions, please put them into the chat box. We will be taking questions at the end all together, and this helps keep interruptions down. And I think that is our usual housekeeping talk. Thank you, everyone. See you at the end.
Thank you, Emily. And the next person I'd like to introduce you to is Marion Palister of Pax Christi Scotland. Marion has very kindly entered into this collaboration with me and the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at the University of Glasgow. And so I want especially to pay tribute to the work that she has done behind the scenes, getting some amazing speakers on board for this programme of events. Marion, over to you.
Thank you, Julie, and hello, everyone. Welcome to our contribution to COP26. I think that Department of Theology and Religious Studies is clear enough, but what about Pax Christi Scotland? Perhaps that's not something you are as familiar with. Pax Christi Scotland is a member organisation of Pax Christi International, the Catholic peace movement founded in 1945. Today, there are over 120 member organisations worldwide promoting peace, respect of human rights, justice and reconciliation throughout the world. Grounded in the belief that peace is possible and that vicious cycles of violence and injustice can be broken, Pax Christi's member organisations address the root causes and destructive consequences of violent conflict and war. So what has that got to do with the climate emergency? What has climate and peace to do with each other? I think that as we progress through this series of events, the answer becomes increasingly obvious. If people can't sustain a livelihood because droughts, floods, fire, weather patterns drastically damage their ability to maintain food security, then peace of mind is affected, society's peace is threatened, and migration elsewhere to seek safety and security endangers the peace of receiving countries. So, with climate and peace so inextricably linked, it was clear that Pax Christi Scotland should join forces with Glasgow University's Theology and Religious Studies Department to present Catholics and COP26. We're hearing from speakers across the globe who are daily experiencing the effects of this crisis and are reacting to it in practical ways, inventive ways, ways that put their faith on the line, non-violent ways. So I thank Julie for the opportunity. And like you, I'm excited to hear how Catholics around the world are working to conserve our common home. And I'd like to invite you to join in a short prayer from Pax Christi Scotland. Lord God, fill our minds with your wisdom, fill our hearts with your love, and guide our words and actions that we might become the living presence of your peace. Bless all of our homelands, that we might witness to your transforming universal call to justice, and inspire all that we do for and with your whole human family to protect and nurture all of your creation. Place within us the minds of servants, that we might build and nurture a world without violence in the building of your kingdom of love, justice, and peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you, Marion. I'm just going to share a screen, everyone. I'm going to begin very briefly by saying something about this programme of events as a whole. And you've heard Marion mention it briefly. I just want to show that we've got live events, of course, Saturday the 6th. We've got 2 earlier ones that we're now processing in order to put onto YouTube channels, the Pax Christi Scotland YouTube channel and also the Theology Religious Studies YouTube channel. All of the materials will go on as recordings onto those YouTube channels. You can read more about the events and what's happening at the website of the university on its events page. I've put the details there. And as I say, you can find the events on the YouTube channels. If I just flick through, you'll see some of the amazing speakers and the extraordinary talks that we've had so far. Mary Colwell and Dawn Nothware, for example, on Monday. And that was followed by Carmen Moreno, Anna Blackman, Carlos Zepeda last night. Tonight, as you know already, we've got Françoise, Nontando and Jan. I'll say more about each of them and their talks presently. But tomorrow we'll also be putting on the YouTube channels an art response to COP26 from people involved with Interplay India and Interplay Australia, some extraordinary performance art. And I do say that that will be something really worth tuning into when we release it at 7 o'clock UK time tomorrow. On Monday, we have an African theme looking at the way in which African voices are responding to the climate emergency. Thursday, the 11th of November, we again have some extraordinary speakers, some of whom are on the call right now. Please join us on Thursday or connect to the recording after the event. The particular theme that day you will see is looking at marginalized communities, especially women and girls and people with disabilities. And the final event is a roundup, really, looking back at COP26 and offering a sort of highlights show of what has already gone and connecting it to what has been happening at the COP26 conference. And of course, the issues that have been going on around it. The next thing I want to do now is to move to our first speaker, and that is Sister Françoise Bosteels. Allow me now just to say a little bit about Françoise before we head into Françoise's input for tonight. Her fan club has turned up here, but Françoise is Belgian by birth and a nurse by profession. Françoise has lived out her religious life in India for the last 48 years. The simple way of village life, as well as people's closeness to nature, fascinated Françoise. She started representing people's day-to-day life through the making of dolls. The experience of life in India, the situation she found people in, the day-to-day events, and her own reflections gave more meaning and purposeful depth to her creation of dolls. They began to reflect Indian life, not only with its breathtaking variety and unique beauty, but life with its gripping and enduring tragedies. Each doll has a story to tell. They embody and express something of her experiences, search, questions, dreams and hopes, of her tears, anger, prayer, and celebrations. As she says, they are a part of me, and I a part of them. Perhaps dolls like these could help people recall their history of resistance to oppression and their struggle for a life of dignity. They could invite us to join hands across the world in dissent against further destruction of all living things and of Mother Earth herself. They could offer us new depths in our understanding of the mystery of relationship to one another, to the earth, and to the divine. The experiential warmth of the dolls is a reason for their appeal to so many who encounter them during exhibitions in and outside India, and that numbers now several thousand people. We're very privileged to be joining that number tonight as I welcome Françoise.
First of all, wholehearted thanks to you, Julie Clague, organizing the Catholic COP26 event, inviting me not only to participate, but also to contribute to the event through my artwork. I'm very happy to respond to the invitation. Dear friends, we all know that global warming is a devastating reality. It has a very unethical historical background of the global north towards the global south. There is a whole worldview involved in what causes global warming with its alarming consequences affecting the entire planet Earth and its systems. Here I present very few issues related to global warming through my artwork. The picture of the dolls you see here represent few native tribal communities in India. It is estimated that today the tribals, also called Adivasi, meaning the people of the land, constitute close to 500 various communities, each having their own traditions and belief systems. They still represent 9% of the total Indian population. Having met a few communities, I grasp something of who they are and what we can learn from their spiritual and ethical values. Adivasis, or tribals, are those who deeply and quietly listen to the earth and her sacred stories, who protect her and refuse to take what pollutes her fragrance and goodness. I heard them saying,
the stars, the moon and the sun, the mountains and the valleys, the rivers, the forests, and the trees in their variety are where the divine creator abides and meets us. These are sacred. The creator cares and loves us and makes the earth so beautiful. Much of the earth is given for our contemplation and celebration. The creator of the earth gives us everything we need, nutritious food to eat throughout the year, medicinal plants and herbs to heal our common ailments and wounds. She gives us fodder for our cattle and fresh air. She is the source of all fertility.
Adivasis' encounter with the divine power lays in nature, her gifts and her cycles, in the sounds of their drums and the movements of their dances. It lays in their community gatherings around campfires telling their stories and in becoming the storytellers of their children and future generations. I believe Adivasis and natives from all continents are our common ancestors. We very much peoples need to seek and learn from their ancient and present wisdom, listen to their many voices and gather their subjugated stories. Sadly enough, through their tremendous resistance, though their tremendous resistance has been at times very successful, many Adivasi communities have seen their sacred mountains and hills become the private property of big multinational companies and corporates who are emptying their natural resources and minerals. Adivasis saw their land and villages taken away for the construction of huge dams, of refinery industries, highways, railways, and others, all in the name of development. And often we can ask, developments for whom, at the cost of what? Today, many Adivasi communities navigate between capitalism and its culture, and their lost cultural and language identity. Many suffer from a social breakdown. Huge numbers are displaced or flee from their areas for lack of alternative options to survive. We may fear if this process of alienation continues in the long run, many more Adivasi communities will be facing total extinction.
Great Spirit, give us hearts to understand, never to take from creation's beauty more than we give, never to destroy wantonly for the furtherance of greed, never to deny to give our hands for the building of earth's beauty, never to take from her what we cannot use. Give us hearts to understand that to destroy earth's music is to create confusion, that to wreck her appearance is to blind us to beauty, that to callously pollute her fragrance is to make a house of stench, that as we care for her, she will care for us.
It was in December 1984 when a breaking news hit headlines announcing a gas leak at a Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. It was considered as being the world's worst industrial disaster. Some 40 tons of methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly toxic chemical, evaporated from the factory into the air. Nobody knew what the composition of the MIC was except for Union Carbide, who did not provide his information to the government and minimized what the effects of the chemical could be. The gas had quickly spread over the city. Thousands were fleeing their homes, many perishing on their way. Thousands of slum dwellers living in the vicinity of the plant and others coming from some distance invaded hospitals. Conventional treatment did not ease the extreme symptoms affecting the lungs, brains, eyes, muscles, as well as the gastrointestinal, neurological, reproductive, and immune systems of the survivors. Soon, loads of dead bodies were taken by military vans for a mass burial. At least 3,000 people died that night, a figure that later rose to an estimated 20,000 dead and 500,000 maimed for life. I scrupulously followed the radio news. The crucial questions were, how and why did this happen? And who is responsible? All possible scenarios causing the accident were looked into. After all the investigation, the exact chain of events had been identified. it was discovered that there had been a sequence of failures pointing to a pattern of negligence. Indeed, the parent corporation of the plant was losing money after earlier expansion and had miscalculated the market. So there was pressure on the plant management to cut costs. Safety measures weakened, small leaks happened, a maintenance supervisor had been laid off. And this to save money at the cost of dangerously neglecting the maintenance of the plant and of putting people at great risk. Only in 1989 did Union Carbide pay the Indian government a meager sum as a settlement which failed to reach the victims and hardly began to cover the cost of Bhopal community incurred as a result of this disaster. Union Carbide has since been acquired by Dow Chemicals, yet Dow has refused to inherit any of their liability. Newspapers had shown horrendous pictures. I sat and wondered if at all possible to imagine the run of thousands of women holding their babies tied to their breasts and men, children, young and old, hoping to run faster than the spreading of the deadly cyanide clouds. I wonder if at all it was possible to imagine the many people left to struggle through their last breath and others with faces that had lost their eyes. Imagine the streets blocked with dead bodies and many left mourning over their destroyed beloved ones. My grief was deep. I was inspired by a picture and a sculpture that appeared in the papers and made a doll, a woman holding her dead baby, covered in her grey sari, looking to the sky, asking in distress, why did it happen? How did it happen? Like her ash-colored dress, so many have been reduced to ash. My doll, a tribute to the people of Bhopal. 34 years later, I visited Bhopal with two friends. We walked through the narrow streets opposite to the dilapidated, abandoned, and rusting plant, causing a huge shadow. Visiting the abandoned Union Carbide factory and the nearby affected site were witness of the dark side of industrial progress. Toxic waste are still lying dumped around the factory. Groundwater still show evidence of toxicity. We entered in several houses along the narrow streets, most affected by the gas leakage, and listened to the stories people wanted to share. What to tell a mother unable to hold her many grieving tears, showing her extreme exhaustion and caring for her sons, unable to get up and walk a few steps, unable to clean and feed themselves? And what about the two adult sons, unable to coordinate their gestures, to speak and communicate? What do they suffer, feel, and think? Till today, hundreds of survivors are queuing at the Sambhavna clinic to get their free of cost medicine. In the Chingari daycare center, there were babies and children with great deformities. The dreadful poison had invaded their mother's womb and continues to do so with mothers feeding their baby with toxic breast milk. We all may forget about the affected people of Bhopal, but for all those we met or not, Bhopal indeed is not a story of 34 years ago. Bhopal is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I could not hold my tears, having also in mind the enormous courage of survivors carers, and of activists, including the many petitions, campaigns, and protest marches to hold the corporate accountable and demanded restitution. I left Bhopal city asking other questions, seeking for answers. Why and how a factory producing such highly poisonous chemicals next to a very crowded area could be allowed to be built? Why people were never told and informed about the existence of a highly poisonous substance next to their house door? What are the safety and first aid measures in case of an accident, and why were people kept ignorant about this? Is it that the lives of the poor are so insignificant and disposable? It wouldn't be called anymore a Bhopal gas tragedy, but the Union Carbide's criminal genocide done to the people of Bhopal. And as many have said, Bhopal is everywhere. And a tearful divine creator asked, where are your sisters? Where are your brothers? What have you done? Since 1973, there is a well-known Indian forest conservation movement which has its origin in the foothills of the Himalayas called the Chipko Movement. Villagers were outraged when the government allotted a large area of forest land to a sporting goods manufacturing company, while they had been forbidden to cut small trees to make their tools for cultivation. The people asked that the license given to the company be cancelled. There was no response to their appeal. It is then that an elder woman of the village organized the women and led them to the forest, asking each one to hug the trees. Chipko means hugging. After many days of protest, finally, the government cancelled the logging permit granted to the company and gave the plot of forest land to the people. This was a non-violent resistance movement. The Indian Prime Minister at that time put 15 years ban on commercial felling in Uttarakhand, Himalaya, following the prolonged resistance of people. Several movements emerged later where women, by hugging the trees, have prevented the logging. This shows the importance of networking in order to obtain something beneficial.
Women heal the earth. She bleeds. With every slash on her body, she weeps. The electric saw cuts deep, cuts quickly, and slowly the forest dies, the soil dies, the earth dies. God knows that the earth weeps and weeps with her. She bleeds. With every battering of her body, she weeps. His hand has power. It cuts deep into her gentle soul. We all weep. Slowly the women die. The community dies. God knows that the women weep and weeps with them. The women resist the saw of the profit-seeking contractor. The women use their wounded bodies to save their trees. They cling to the trees, defying death. They stop the saw. They stop the flow of blood. They heal the forest. They heal the earth. The women resist the violence, the power of the arrogant and strong. The women transcend suffering and pain to save their lives. women of the Chipko movement, women of the earth, women survivors of violence, women of hope. They weep no more. They heal their bodies. They heal the earth.
We also noticed the birds. They are speaking in the name of the magnificent Earth's family. And they say,
do you know, Mother Earth has worked really hard to bring her living creatures into being. You humans are part of us, and we're part of you.
With a saddened tone, they continue.
Humans, what have you done to us? What are you doing to us? So many species of the animal kingdom I belong to have disappeared. Why are you destroying us and taking such an annihilating path? Why are you not hearing the desperate whistle of the birds and the cry of so many others of our animal family? You destroy our habitats, cut the trees, put fire on the forest, spray with chemicals the fruits you and we eat, poison the air you and we breathe, pollute the waters you and we drink, poison the soil, inject us with hormones, test our immunity, cages in zoos. Are we not all children of Mother Earth? There is no hope of recovering what you are destroying. The future holds a great peril or a great promise. Let your hope become an act of contrition and restoration.
We thank the little birds holding the same language as does Mother Earth for challenging the madness of the humans and for warning us of a possible imminent annihilation if we do not radically change our narrow mindset. We thank them and the many animals for being in harmony with the earth and nature, and for being part of this huge network of living relationship with the universe. There is an emergency wake-up call from Greta Thunberg. The courage and audacity of Greta impressed me greatly. The now 18-year-old young women since a very young age listened to scientists regarding causes, consequences, and the possible devastation of the earth due to global warming. She used her powerful silent voice by sitting for 3 weeks on the ground in front of the Swedish Parliament till Election Day in August 2018, holding her homemade banner, School Strike for Climate. The media took interest and her action made international news. The school strike spread to other Swedish cities, to other European countries, and finally to other continents. All over the world, an estimated more than 7 million children and students embrace the school strike every week. Fridays for Future, in view of climate justice. Invited to the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Poland, 2018, Greta addressed the audience, and here follows a part of her address.
I care about climate justice and the living planet. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people who continue making enormous amounts of money. Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It's the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. If the solutions within the system are so impossible to find, maybe we should change the system itself. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past, and you will ignore us again. You have run out of excuses, and we are running out of time. But I have learned that we are never too small to make a difference. Imagine what we could do together if we really wanted to. But to do that, we have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. We cannot solve the crisis without treating it as a crisis. We have not come here to let you know that change is coming. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not. The real power belongs to the people.
In all Greta's many addresses in world forums or in climate conferences, she has shown that children and the youth are at the heart of the struggle for a more sustainable and ethical future. How far have her very strong worded challenges been of some consequence to politicians and world leaders is for each one of us to find out. In few words, Greta's message to the world is simple.
Fine words about the climate are not enough. Share our panic and take action right now.
With Greta, the global family has been challenged. If we humans are able to create a planetary chaos, we are also able to create a global and creative solidarity to heal the planet. It is also good to hear what Vinisha Umashankar, a 15-year-old girl from Tamil Nadu, India, told in her address to the COP26 assembly a few days ago to the world leaders. What she said.
We won't wait for you to act. We will lead even if you don't. We will act even if you delay. We will build the future even if you are stuck in the past.
The 8 dolls on display are my latest creation. They represent places where I have been invited to have dolls exhibition. You see a peasant woman with her typical Bolivian hat. Next to her squats a little Vietnamese girl holding the hand to a Northeast Indian boy carrying his agricultural produce on his back. Then there is the South African flute player sitting next to an elderly Dalit woman unable to squat. Hence, she is sitting on a little bench. You see the Indian woman dressed in her churidar, reaching out to a Belgian visually impaired young man. The Indian Muslim woman closes the circle as she holds the hand of the Bolivian women. All have their arms stretched out, holding each one's hands, forming a global community of people. Far beyond caste and class, poor and rich, sex and age divides. Far beyond religion, cultural and nationality exclusions. They are humans forming a global network of solidarity. They form a circle far beyond hierarchical positions, rulers and ruled, exploiters and exploited, superiors and inferiors, far beyond competition, individualism, consumerism, and greed, far beyond hatred, conflict, and war. They rather represent a true democratic relation. They all learn and receive from one another and value each one's uniqueness. They nurture their true identity, embrace unity in diversity, creativity, communion, and peace with justice. You notice the variety in colors of their dresses. These are inspired by the rainbow colors, the trees and their seasons, the flowers, the birds and the butterflies. Nature inspired me. The 8 people are squatting on the grass. They could as well be squatting under a crooked or dancing tree, dismissed because of its low commercial value. They're sitting on grass, not minding the tiniest insect, knowing them to be part of the wonders of nature. So it is with all animal life. You see a basket with fruits, the fruits of the earth who nourishes us. Knowing that the earth is not their private property or possession, the people in the circle rather celebrate the earth from where they have their substance and being. The earth is a gift to them. They will never take away what may hurt her fragrance. At the center is a net with multiple dots. Each dot holds a tiny, shining jewel. There is a mirror game between the jewels. In one little jewel, all the others are reflected. Likewise, the little jewel reflects in all the others. The jewels are thus interrelated, interconnected, and in communion. They are a symbol of the universe. Indeed, there is a relation and interdependence between the galaxies, the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, and the earth. One does not exist without the other. They all are on a creative cosmic journey, and we are part of that journey. We are one with the universe, and the stars are our ancestors. The child, the young and the elderly, the women and men, all holding their hands with one another and sitting in a circle, make a statement about the cosmic reality. They say,
there is a movement and a dance at play in the entire process of the unfolding universe. The same is at play in the tiniest atom, and so since the creation of the universe. There is diversity, creativity, allurement, imagination, intelligence, and communion. There is sound and music, light, darkness, thunder, and lightning. There is peace and chaos going on in the universe, and so it is today. The unfathomable vibrance of the divine mystery present since the origin of creation is alive in each of us humans, having entered the scene of this grand journey of evolution very late in time. We humans are gifted with consciousness, memory, creativity, and imagination. We are gifted with love, compassion, and forgiveness, with capacity to laugh and to cry, to share, to care, and to ask, to give, to receive, and to thank.
when the 8 people in the circle have so spoken, let us imagine they stand up and turn to the 8 directions of the earth. They are stretching out their arms, waving with their hands a gesture of welcoming.
Come, come, you people of the earth. You are invited to take responsibility according to your own capacity to heal the earth and to stop the bleeding.
Then they make a declaration.
All life, all forms of life on this earth are sacred. Let yourself be embraced by nature and the cosmos. Let go of your old garment and let your hearts fall in love with the earth in her totality.
Thank you.
Sister Françoise, thank you. And before we end, I simply must ask you to say something about this socially engaged art. Tell us something about the story of the dolls.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think you have already given a very pointed introduction to what is the meaning of the dolls and what important role they have played in society for all those who have pondered over them. But I can share that in exhibitions and so many times people have asked, where did you learn to make dolls? I will say I never learned unless I learned by doing by my own. And it is at the age of 16, 17, when I was bedridden for 1.5 years, that my mother gave some material like pipe cleaners or flannel cloth. So I made little dolls with that material, like pipe cleaners to make a skeleton, and then a wool to make muscles, and flannel to cover and to dress, things like that. I made little dolls and slowly giving character to that. And it is years later when I went to India that I brought some leftover material, thinking I will be happy to make a Christmas script. And as you were saying, indeed, living in the village for a long period of time, I have been so fascinated by the simplicity of people's day-to-day life, their closeness to nature, their respect of nature also. And I started to represent the village life, and these were the Christmas people. Of course, they were Indian of character. And slowly I came across not only the beautiful side of the village around and people, their various craft making mats with palm leaf, etc. I also came across forms of violence, injustices, exploitation, sexual abuse of women, of children, child labor, so many issues, things that really touch me, that disturb me, or that were celebration of life. I have made most of the time, at least for many years, I made this at night from 9 till 2, 3 o'clock morning in the silence of the night when I am very involved thinking about the issue that I am representing and also very concentrated on what I am doing. It is well like times of hours of meditation. And it is the warmth of the dolls that appealed people, friends, grassroots workers to write stories and poems about the dolls which have come into publications. And it is also the warmth of the dolls that appeal people to come to workshops where people have been telling their stories, because many times people ask, can you teach us to make dolls? I say, no, it's not a craft, just to teach how to make. But if it is a storytelling workshop where you can make dolls with your with local material and tell stories, and that has been very meaningful for people, mainly from the marginal communities, women, to tell their story, which they never could tell. So there is a kind of healing process that went on, and which they have many times continued on their own to make dolls to tell stories.
Thank you.
So we are in short, a long story.
Thank you so much. Let's now turn to our next speaker, please. And that's Nontando Hadebe. Nontando, I'm going to introduce you and your talk today. Nontando was born in Zimbabwe. She studied and now works in South Africa. Her research interests include African theology, pastoral and contextual theology, feminist and womanist theology, liberation theology, and pastoral psychology. Until recently, Nontando was senior lecturer at St Augustine's College in South Africa. She's now the international coordinator for Side by Side Gender Justice Movement. Nontando is also a member of the ecumenical group known as the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. She's also very involved in two Catholic initiatives, Catholic Women Speak and Catholic Women Preach. Nontando is very much in demand as a speaker, and tonight you're going to find out why when she asked the question, can green be the colour of justice? COP26 and poverty. Nontando.
Thank you so much, Julie, for the generous introduction. Thank you for the privilege. I am just in awe of the presentation by Sister Françoise on the dolls. It just took me to just another space. It engaged all my senses, and so I just want to appreciate and say thank you for the presentation and its richness. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I think all of us are familiar with the word green and the way it is used in all ecological language, and particularly in COP26, you know. And I often wonder, you know, so everything is like, let's green our planets, let's go into green energy, and all kinds of initiatives that attach the color green to, or the label of green. And so we need to be asking, who is controlling this language? So green in the hands of those in power refers to change negotiated in boardrooms, political circles, but not in villages. You know, if you just then ask anyone in the street about, you know, the greening of the climate change movement, they will not be able to understand what you are talking about. And so what I'm basically arguing right from the beginning is that the greening and the language using the color green for an ecological transformation is being guided, is being driven by those in power, so that it becomes a fashionable word. And when we look at it, is it used to pacify activists for justice, to soften the brutality of economic systems that are behind, no, sorry, not behind the climate change, but the climate disaster, you know, and also even the climate change narrative. And so my presentation is really to say, how can we take back the color of green and associate it with justice, and make that the legacy that we take out from COP26, that green is the color of justice. And I like in the previous presentation about taking back these discourses and narratives and making them serve the interests of the poor. So I just want to, and then I will go on to like the context of resistance and the context that I want to discuss in order to really flesh out this notion. So the outline that I'll use is setting the context, and I begin with the legacy of holistic ecology from African traditional religions. And this is an act of resistance because we know that when it comes to knowledge about ecological issues, we know that science and Western knowledge have dominated the discourse, and African traditional knowledge, and that is what is happening in the whole decolonial language initiative that we're having, is reclaiming that knowledge and integrating it into contemporary issues. But when we are reclaiming African indigenous knowledge, it is done with the understanding that it doesn't now become the only knowledge, but it becomes knowledge that is integrated with other knowledge systems, so that we almost dismantle the dominance, the hegemonic dominance of Western knowledge. And then we're going to look at the ecology of justice, just a quotation from Laudato Si and ecofeminism. And then we are going to look at greening, COP26 for justice. We're going to look at the spirituality of greening, so that when we enter into this conversation of reclaiming green for justice, we have a legacy through Hildegard of Bingen in the Catholic tradition, who speaks about greening, God's presence in the world as greening, justice as greening. And so we do have a reference point in terms of our spirituality and faith. And then just greening in the ecological discourse, and greening against poverty. And I want to do a case study of Wangari Maathai, the Nobel Peace Prize. And the significance of this case study is that it began as a greening project, and we'll talk more about that. And from there, it became a social justice with effortlessly. It was almost as if the social justice was the natural consequence of the greening project. And then it brings me back to the claim, the call, that green is the color of justice. And then setting the context for resistance, I already spoke about the legacy, the knowledge, not only amongst African traditional religions, but indigenous religions around the world had a relationship of interdependence, an acknowledgement of the relatedness of all beings, and a respect and honoring of the earth. And it wasn't just an abstract kind of ecological, beliefs, but it was integrated because the entire culture and spirituality was integrated, so that the flourishing of the community, which also means that every person in the community, was sharing in the resources of the community, so that there was, equality, a form of equality, but a form also of a participatory kind of economics and politics. So we're not saying that indigenous cultures were perfect, but we're saying that in the ecology, in the integration of all of life, they possess a knowledge that you cannot separate the well-being of people from the well-being of the earth. The two are united. So that knowledge is part of indigenous knowledge that is going to be reclaimed in the whole core for green as the color of justice. And so I say, like John Beattie describes African traditional religions, the spirituality of the land, the interdependence, interconnectedness with land, and the flourishing of the community, that those two are related because there is a connectedness in that understanding. And so we see how colonialism brought the greening of injustice, the land dispossession of indigenous people, the exploitation of the land and its resources. And the previous speaker alluded to that. We know that Africa is the richest continent, and the exploitation of the resources don't benefit the people. It's the poorest continent as well. So again, there's that disconnect between the resources and who is exploiting, and the indigenous people that live and are not benefiting from any of these resources that are in the neighborhood. And so we become clear about the colonial project in Africa and the creation of systems, economic and political systems of injustice and inequality. And it's very interesting. For example, they say that Johannesburg, where I'm currently based, is the greenest. It's got more trees than any city in the world. But those trees are mostly in affluent areas. So you find that in areas where majority of the people live, the poor, you don't have those trees there. So again, you green in an unjust way, in an unequal way. That's why I say the greening of injustice, and parks and nature reserves are inaccessible to majority of the people, and many were pushed out of their land in order to create these green spaces. So again, we see the greening of injustice as the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. And when we're talking about the landless poor, again, we bring in the whole issue of feminism, where women represent those who are the poorest. And then we come to the relationship between ecology, justice, and poverty. And I think Laudato Si is our classic text, where Pope Francis says, today, however, where he makes that the cry of the earth is the cry of the poor. We have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So that we already see that connection between the ecological crisis, climate change, and the plight of the poor, that those two are related. So therefore, to green in whatever way, whether it's alternative energy resources or anything, cannot be separated from the plight of the poor. And I think that is one of the things that we're carrying through. And then if we look at ecology itself, it's a science that concerns itself with the interrelationships among all forms of life. It aims to harmonize nature, human and non-human. It is not only a descriptive science, but also engages in a critical analysis of society. It is a critical science which grounds and necessitates a critique of the existing society. So what it's saying is that what we are seeing is not an accident or a natural phenomena. It is a byproduct of human decisions and human systems, and therefore can be critiqued, can be analyzed, can be deconstructed and replaced. So very much, giving us the framework to be able to engage in a very systematic way. So when we look at women and ecology, ecofeminism, it says that finds that the common thread that runs through ecofeminism throughout the world is that the domination of women and the domination of nature are intimately connected and mutually reinforcing. And it's really, when you think about, for example, the colonial legal system that, made women minors. They were minors before the law, could not sign contracts. They were dependent on their husbands. And so that was a system of domination. And with it, colonialism imposed a hierarchy of relationships, for example, gender inequality, the superiority of white race over Black, superiority of Western knowledge over indigenous knowledge, all kinds of hierarchies of power. And so even gender inequality has been imported, as well as homophobia, really imported from colonial systems, as well as early forms of Christianity. So we are finding that even when we are talking about feminism, and people may feel that feminism is un-African, but they are Africans who are dealing with the same issues using different titles to say that this domination on so many levels, colonial domination came with systems of dominations as well. And so the spiritual dimension, so as we approach COP26 and the whole greening of justice, we look to Hildegard of Bingen, and she brings this concept of Veritatis, the greening of creation through the power of God. So we are seeing in COP26 the whole language of greening of energy, greening of all kinds of things in order to reduce fossil fuel and all the impact on climate change. But I think for us, the greening goes even deeper, because it becomes a spiritual activity, not a dictate from COP26, but a spiritual activity that is rooted in the traditions of the faith, and particularly in the writings of the mystic, Hildegard of Bingen, and also that the mystic is female, then that again adds that dimension of the connectedness of the earth with women, and just that whole renewal that comes with it. So the earth is at the same time mother. She's the mother of all that is natural, mother of all that is human. She's the mother of all, for contained in her are the seeds of all. So we are doing some of the quotations from her writings. And she says, like, now in the people that were meant to be green, there's no more life of any kind. So here in that spirituality, and this is what we see a lot in mysticism and the spiritualities, is always that there's a connection between spirituality and social justice. So immediately she picks on that in the greening theology. She says, when observing the world, she says there's no more greening. In other words, greening does not exist when there is evil, selfish going on, when there is uncleanliness and injustice, and it injures the earth. So right there, we encounter spirituality of greening that is associated with, with justice and critique of systems or ways of being that are, destructive to human relationships, as well as, and saying by consequence, they become destructive to the earth. So we see that integration that we saw in African theology, in Laudato Si, in ecofeminism. Now we are seeing it in the spirituality of greenness. And then again, that note of hope, that humankind, full of all creative possibilities, is God's work. Humankind alone is called to assist God. Humankind is called to co-create. With nature's help, humankind can set into creation all that is necessary and life-sustaining, and although this may feel on face value like more anthropocentric, that creating a hierarchy between humanity and creation, but in a way it holds humanity responsible in this respect, that part of what is happening, the ecological crisis, is human-made and holds human accountable for addressing that, and not just as a program, but as a deeply spiritual response to that. So in other words, to be Christian means to be greening, and greening means to be promoting justice, and justice means to put poverty at the center of greening. So those connections become more and more clear. And so we see that, just giving an example of greening justice, a practical example in the life of Wangari Maathai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner that we're all familiar with, and the founder of Green Belt Movement, a grassroots response to the life-threatening impact of an ecological crisis on the lives of rural women in Kenya. And then it evolved into a resistance movement championing human rights, peace, and democracy. Once again, greening as justice is almost inseparable, and it's something that we can claim. The Green Belt movement in Kenya started in 1977 when women from rural areas and urban centers, reflecting on their needs at organized forums, spoke about environmental degradation. They did not have firewood, they needed fruit to cure malnutrition, they needed clean drinking water, but the pesticides and herbicides used on farms to grow polluted the water. Although initially, as I said, the Green Belt's tree planting activities did not address issues of democracy and peace, it soon became clear that responsible governance of the environment was impossible without democratic space. Therefore, the tree became a symbol for the democratic struggle in Kenya. The green tree became a symbol. So we see a very practical association between greening and justice, green as the color of justice. Citizens were mobilized to challenge widespread abuses of power, corruption, and environmental mismanagement. So that's really a practical example of the argument that I'm making and the proposal that to be green in the fullest sense of the word means to be just, and to be just in a world of economic inequality means to address poverty, that those are so interrelated that one cannot be done without the other. So how do we bring that to COP26? And I just want to begin with a few statements where from South Africa, which has been called to reduce dependency on coal for energy. And so they are emphasizing the necessity of a just, equitable, and inclusive transition for workers and affected communities so that all are protected against the risks and the benefits from the opportunities presented by this transition, and no one is left behind. So if we are transitioning to green energy, then the whole thing, it needs to be just. It needs to be attentive to communities. It needs to bring on board communities whose livelihood depends on multinational companies that are using coal. That's where their jobs are. And so to green means that it needs to be community-led. It needs to transform the lives of communities. Otherwise, we will repeat the same thing where that becomes beneficial to those that already possess power without any impact on the lives of the poorest of the poor, majority of whom are women. And then I want to just quotes from two young women that are leading the struggle. Vanessa Nakate from Uganda, and she talks about in the context there, in the past few years, I've seen more and more of how the climate crisis is affecting the African continent, which is ironic given that Africa is the lowest emitter of carbon dioxide emissions of all continents except for Antarctica. Many Africans are losing their lives while countless more are losing their livelihoods. And you can add even COVID to that, and then you find a whole, I think, increase in poverty and really solutions that exclude the poor. And then Greta, whom we all know, she says something also profound. She says the climate crisis is, of course, only a symptom of a much larger crisis, a crisis based on the idea that some people are worth more than others and therefore have the right to exploit and steal other people's land and resources. It is very naive to believe that we can solve this crisis without confronting the roots of it. So what we are seeing from these statements from the South African government, as well as from the two young women in the forefront, is that it's inseparable. Unless green becomes the color of justice, the climate change will be something that stays in the boardroom and benefits companies who will use green to portray a face of the same economic systems that exploited the poor in a kind of acceptable way without changing anything. And so the call to Catholics is that greening justice is a call to make climate change reflect Catholic social teaching, including the preferential option for the poor, the integrity of creation, and solidarity. Green, let's take it back as the color of justice. Thank you very much.
Nontando, that was wonderful. And thank you for drawing attention to the important themes such as the colonial legacy that we're still trying to deal with and the entangled nature of that. You've brought that out so clearly. And in addition, of course, the effects on women and girls. I'm going to hand over straight away to Jan Jans, our next speaker, visiting professor at St Augustine College, South Africa, and retired Associate Professor of Ethics at Tilburg University in the Netherlands. Since his studies at the Catholic University of Leuven, Jan has served on the boards of many academic journals, scholarly societies, and institutional ethics committees. He's the author of numerous articles on Catholic theological ethics and has taught classes, delivered public lectures, and presented academic papers across the globe. He's one of the most traveled academics I've ever met. And Jan's also a keen photographer and has captured many of the world's most famous theologians at conferences he's attended. Jan's going to talk to us now about the eager longing for creation, on the necessary differentiation between nature and creation. Jan.
Yes, thank you, Julie. Very kind introduction. And it will be a bit different, this talk, because I'm not a charismatic person and I'm not an activist. So it will be a bit different. The title of this talk is, it goes back a long way. I will say two more words about it. But of course, you can see that there is at least a reference to St. Paul in the letter to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 19, for the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. Okay, but that's not what I want to talk about. It goes back to what I want to present tonight, to justice, peace, and the integrity of creation, which was started in a way at the World Conference, the Council meeting in Vancouver, 1983. And I looked it up again because you have it in your memory, but it gets distorted a bit. So the thing there was to engage member churches in a conciliar process of mutual commitment, covenant to justice, peace, and, the bold is mine, the integrity of creation should be a priority for World Council programs. And I do remember, I was beginning to set up a thing for a dissertation. I do remember that I wondered why there is justice, peace, and the integrity of creation, why they are next to each other, because I thought, from what I was understanding from the Catholic social teaching and beginning of moral theology, that justice and peace are building blocks for the integrity of creation. So integrity of creation contains justice and peace. And I had the impression also in many discussions that followed then that this was not really grasped by many of the people who engaged in this justice, peace, and integrity of creation effort. So, okay, then I had the occasion to bring this up again many years later. You can look at the date at the Catholic Theological Ethics in the World Church Conference in Sarajevo, 2018. I had a poster that had the same title as today, although I have made a little change, if you noted that. So, longing for creation. And as you can see at the title here, I changed it in preparing this talk to an eager longing for co-creation. I think that is not without meaning. So at the poster, I said there, the point of departure for an eager longing for creation is I see a problem in the mixing up of the notions, the concepts, and also the contents of what people mean by nature and what they mean by creation. I see it in important theological texts. Of course, in 2018, the reference was to Laudato Si, but you can also see it in other texts. The thing there on the Amazon, if you read that, especially the second chapter there, you get a feeling of, oh, this is really naive, or even this is a romantic vision of nature. And that might be a possible impediment for an effective ecological ethics. If you are using language like the earth and then creation, earth creation, so it's our mother, that might hamper you in taking a good and hard look at what is going on, which is not so fantastic or which is not so in harmony and so on. Okay, let's try to unpack this a little bit. What I see emerging is a new theology of nature, which comes down to various forms of re-sacralization of nature. Or if you want to use the old image of the great chain of being, where everything is having its fixed place, because it is fixed, it is good, are we seeing today a kind of ecological great chain of being, which should or could inspire us towards awe and gratitude for nature or creation. And again, they are used a kind of mixture. Pope Benedict in his first encyclical did that. And also when he was praising the beauty of the mountains in the north of Italy, I thought, Okay, ecology, in my understanding, is and should remain a descriptive category. It is the study of ecosystems, which turn out, if you study them, that they are not a great chain of being, but as ecosystems, they are the ongoing struggle for survival. So ecosystems, even if they are, so to say, in balance, are not win-win situations. Or in the other language of peace and justice, ecosystems can be very dynamic, but they do not aim towards peace and justice. You might say that the arch of history is aiming towards peace and justice. One can hope for that, but ecosystems do not. They are indifferent to notions of peace and justice. And it doesn't matter. I have the picture there in top. I took that last week. It was on the parking lot of the church I was going to do the homily. And I thought, yes, this is really beautiful. But even if you know about how beautiful it is and you admire its beauty, even if you know those things, if you eat of this, you will not survive. So let's look into this notion, nature as our common home. Yes, it is to a degree, because it's a very ambivalent and even a very dangerous home. And if you don't have enough knowledge of these ecosystems, then it might even destroy you. That is the whole crisis that we are going through. And I hope that enough understanding gets into the political decisions, not just looking good or sounding good. Oh, maybe then we can say that creation is our common home. Yes, no, not yet. I would suggest that creation is our common destination. That I see creation as an eschatological category, which you can compare with the eschatological categories that we call the Basileia tou Theou, the kingdom of God. It is already among us, but not yet. And it is already among us in parts. And we have a role to play there ourselves. The background of this is what I learned from the German moral theologian Klaus Demmer. And I'm still following that approach. He has an hermeneutical moral theological methodology. And he says we have to differentiate. So the idea to differentiate between nature and creation, the background there is again Demmer. We have to differentiate between what he calls the level of facts. Secondly, the level of the interpretation of those facts from the perspective of meaning. In German, it's Deutung. And of course, you can say, oh, this is anthropocentrism again. The answer, of course, is yes, but there is no escape from anthropocentrism. It depends on the type of anthropocentrism that you are following. Is it a me, myself type of anthropocentrism, or a more social one, for example, in the philosophy of Paul Ricoeur? And the third level is the level of practical moral action. Let's apply this to what we are discussing tonight. So first, there is our evolving knowledge of nature as ecosystems. And yes, these ecosystems are our factual common home. Language here is descriptive. You could say it's quantitative. Second, there is a theological reading or interpretation of what appears to be good. And good here, the content of it, I will like to define as what is able to and what is open to the possibility of incarnation. For those who like the funny words, this is theo and pantism, or it is very similar to finding God in everything, which is, of course, a famous phrase from Ignatius. But I would qualify that as finding God in everything to the degree that God is able to be found or be present in anything. I still struggle to find God in HIV or in COVID-19. Or in the words of my colleague in the Netherlands, Erik Borgman, yes, nature is holy ground. That means it is the trust that God is present in reality and urges or attracts towards justice and peace. And the language here is metaphorical, it is evocative, it is narrative, it is appealing, it is visionary, it is luring. It has all the elements of quality. And then finally, the third level, that is action towards climate justice based on knowledge of ecosystems seen through the perspective of level 2. And this is what I call an eager longing for co-creation, which is revealed, you see sometimes a little bit of it, by the glimmers of what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful, and where they meet and mix with each other. And language here is a normative mixture of the level 1 and level 2. Just as all practical moral norms, they are mixed norms. You say something about what you know, and then you give, or you tell what kind of interpretation you give to it, so that it becomes something which is practically normative for you. If you do believe that nature has the possibility of becoming holy ground, of being a co-creator, that will push you in certain directions in concrete acting. And then finally, let me give a tentative example of how I thought that we could maybe bring nature and creation together in a more fruitful way. And my example would be the Eucharist, where bread and wine are both the fruits of nature and the work of human hands. So there is already something, it's not nature pure, it has already gone through a certain human element or human activity, just as the dolls that Sister Françoise is making are not just the material, it's the material and how she is shaping it and expressing something with it that then goes beyond the material. So the Eucharist is where bread and wine are both the fruits of nature and the work of human hands, which by the story and the ritual of consecration become a sacrament of co-creation. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, for that extraordinary, short, sweet, but exceptionally provocative and deep account. That's really very rich. Thank you to all our speakers tonight. I haven't got any specific questions in the chat, but perhaps there might be some people who want to put them in that now. If so, please do. But without question, that has been so enriching and inspiring. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I certainly want to be able to say a very, very firm thank you to our speakers. And thank you to you guys for sticking with us and accompanying us on that extraordinary intellectual journey. Heart and head, I think, have been stimulated tonight. Marion, do you want to say a few words as we draw to a close?
Only to say a very, very warm thank you to all of our speakers. So inspirational, so challenging. And I think saying all of the things that we hoped they would address and have addressed them in a way that makes us really go home and think very deeply. So thank you to all of them, and of course thank you to everybody who has joined us this evening.
Thank you one and all, and the show's over to tonight, and hopefully we'll catch up with you later on Monday for our next live event, and on the 11th, and maybe also try to catch up with Art for Earth, the presentation coming from India and Australia, which will be on YouTube tomorrow from 7 p.m. UK time. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.